All right, let's dive straight into this explainer. Today, we're looking at a story from the ancient epic, the Mahabharata, and it is wild. We're exploring this fascinating narrative where a simple, quiet twilight stroll turns into a fiery, magical battle, and then surprisingly transforms into this timeless lesson on power, vulnerability, and statecraft. It's honestly a perfect example of how ancient texts managed to hide really profound political philosophy right inside breathtaking mythological action. So picture this. It's a dark, solitary riverbank at twilight. The Pandava brothers, along with their mother Kunti, are traveling north toward Panchala. They hit the sacred banks of the river Ganga just as the sun is dipping below the horizon. Now, Arjun is walking point. He's got a burning torch in his hand to show the way and, ward off wild animals. But as it turns out, wild animals aren't the only things lurking in the shadows when mortals trespass on celestial time. Without even realizing it, they are stepping into a highly dangerous, sacred region at the absolute worst possible moment. Chapter 1. The Forbidden Twilight Encounter. As the Pandavas approach the river, this proud Gandharva king named Angaraparna is already there, sporting in the solitary waters with his wives. And he hears the heavy footsteps of mortal men, and he is infuriated. He immediately threatens them for invading this highly specific supernatural window. You see, the rules of time here are incredibly strict. That gray twilight right before nightfall, specifically the very first 40 seconds, is exclusively appointed for celestial beings and spirits to wander wherever they want. The rest of the night? That's for man. So Angaraparna is absolutely furious that mere mortals, driven by what he assumes is greed or ignorance, would dare interrupt this highly restricted sliver of time. Chapter 2. Clash over the Sacred River. Well, this tension just completely boils over into a massive clash of two entirely different philosophies. On one side, you have Angaparna boasting that this forest is his closed domain, relying purely on his celestial strength, with absolutely no gods or men allowed to even approach. But Arjuna, he takes this beautifully democratic view of nature and spirituality. He literally calls the Gandharva a blockhead, arguing that the sacred Ganga River flows in 7 streams for everyone so they can be cleansed of their sins. He lays it out clearly: no one can bar others from the mountains, the oceans, or sacred waters, no matter what time of day it is. Of course, the argument quickly escalates into an all-out physical fight. Angaraparna starts shooting arrows that are basically like venomous snakes, but Arjuna casually wards them off with his shield and his torch, telling him that normal weapons vanish like froth against a true warrior. Then, Arjuna decides to take it up a notch. He summons a blazing, fiery weapon. And what's really fascinating here is the revered pedigree of this magic. It was passed down from Brihaspati to Bharadwaja to Agnivija to his master Drona, and finally to Arjuna. This isn't just a magic trick, it's a terrifying legacy of devastating power. And the result is brutal. Arjuna hurls this blazing weapon, and the Gandharva's magnificent chariot is burnt to ash in a trice. Deprived of his consciousness by the sheer concussive force of the blast, the mighty Gandharva falls head downward from his ruined chariot. And Arjuna shows absolutely no hesitation. He seizes the unconscious celestial king by the hair, which, by the way, is adorned with these lovely garlands of flowers, and just drags him right over to his brothers. Chapter 3. Mercy and Mystical Exchanges. Now, the vibe shifts entirely here. The Gandharva's life, Kumbinasi, is terrified, and she pleads with Yudhishthira for her husband's life. Bound by his strict moral codes, Yudhishthira instructs Arjuna to spare the defeated enemy, pointing out that you shouldn't slay a foe who is stripped of power and protected by a woman. And the subtle irony of what happens next is just incredible. This terrifying monster, having just had his chariot totally vaporized and his life spared, immediately pivots to declaring Arjuna his new best friend. He humbles himself completely. He even abandons his own name, which literally translated to blazing vehicle, since his vehicle is now a pile of cinders. He tells Arjuna he's incredibly fortunate to have met him and been defeated by him. So, what's the payout for this new, kind of forced friendship? To show his immense gratitude for keeping his life, the Gandharva offers a huge gift: 100 celestial horses. But these aren't just your standard horses. These are celestial steeds born in the Gandharva region. They can change color at will. They never, ever get tired, even if they look skin and bones. And they run at the literal speed of the mind. That's a real game changer. Chapter 4. The Science of Illusion. But wait, it gets better. Physical gifts just aren't enough for this guy. The Gandharva insists on offering something way more profound in exchange for the fiery weapon Arjuna used to wreck him. He gifts Arjuna Chakshushi, the celestial science of producing illusions. This is massive. It grants the possessor the power to see whatever they wish to see through spiritual sight, basically elevating them to the level of the gods. Now, normally, acquiring this incredible power requires an intense vow where you have to stand on one leg for 6 entire months. But the Gandharva, he graciously waives that little requirement for his merciful victor. Chapter 5. Why Wander Without a Priest? Okay, here's where we get to why this whole thing actually matters. It's a brilliant pivot from a magical fable into some hardcore ancient political strategy. Arjuna asks a very practical question. Look, since you clearly knew our great lineage, why did you attack us in the dark? And the Gandharva's answer is an absolute masterclass in statecraft. He reveals that despite their undeniable physical power, the brothers showed some critical vulnerabilities. They were wandering without wives, without a defined social mode of life, and most crucially, without a learned Brahmana priest to guide them. Because they lacked this social and spiritual grounding, they looked like easy prey for celestial forces whose power peaks at night. Actually, the Gandharva freely admits a pretty shocking truth here. He says Arjuna only survived this encounter because he was currently in the pure brahmacharya mode of life. That's a state of intense discipline and celibacy. The Gandharva explicitly states that if a standard married Kshatriya wandering into the night had tried to fight them like this, they would have never ever escaped with their life. That discipline was his literal shield. And this right here builds to the ultimate political lesson. The Gandharva lays out the definitive formula for lasting success. Relying purely on your bravery and the glory of your birth, that's incomplete. It cannot guarantee safety in the dark, and it definitely cannot acquire or hold land. But when you combine Kshatriya might, that raw physical and military power, with a learned, truthful Brahmana priest who possesses self-command to guide the state, you are absolutely unstoppable. This is the combination that conquers the whole earth, ensures protection from unseen dangers, and earns heaven. Which brings us to the massive takeaway that anchors this entire explainer. Know therefore, O perpetuator of Kuru's race, that the kingdom lasteth forever, in which Brahmanas have power. The source material is taking this wild, mystical battle and using it to teach a fundamental lesson about the balance of statecraft. Raw martial power, no matter how glorious or brave you are, is blind and vulnerable in the dark if you don't have the strategic, moral, and spiritual guidance of an educated advisor. So let's wrap this up with a question for you. Thousands of years later, the lesson of this Twilight clash on the Ganges still echoes. Sure, we might not be out here fighting Gandharvas for river access, but the core question remains. In your modern pursuit of success, have we forgotten to balance our raw strength, our resources, our technology, our drive, with strategic, moral guidance? Are you moving through the dark relying only on your own might, or do you have the wisdom to let learned counsel light your way? Just something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.